Castillon Confidencial by Albert Castillon. Welcome, insiders. How are you? Thank you for being there. Strength, honor, and onward. Look, Ceuta doesn't give up. It doesn't bow its head. Demonstrations, gatherings, acts of protest. The king promising the president of Ceuta that he will go visit him. He should have said, when my superior lets me, I mean the one in charge who isn't the king. Everything we're going to tell you here, they're more than just clues. They're proof that everything is very dirty and nothing should be this way. The reins of Spain are not held by the citizen or by political power, nor by a tyrant like Sanchez who doesn't even win elections. With a group of people who hate this country but who keep him in power for their own interests, mostly economic ones. What happened in Ceuta? Could it happen again? I hope not next Saturday, and we'll be keeping an eye on it this week. Meanwhile, what has happened is a leak from Chinese intelligence. That's very unusual. If something leaks from China, it's because they permit it, according to which the massive arrival of immigrants in Ceuta was part of an intelligence operation driven, yes, by Morocco, but also by the Mossad. We already told you here that Israel coordinated that invasion to a large extent. But don't forget that the one who allowed it, instigated it, and organized it was Morocco. The goal is to bring down Sanchez, which is Israel's objective. Israel or the United States doesn't care about Ceuta and Melilla. Morocco is interested, and it seems that Sanchez doesn't care either. Therefore, that's how it is. They're smoothing the way as long as it keeps him in power. According to this leaked report from Chinese intelligence, Mossad planted agents among the invaders heading to the border. Some instigators were stirring up discontent, inciting those crowds, shouting that the border had been opened, telling them to go ahead, that there was no problem. With Morocco's collaboration in the transfer and permissiveness at the access points, the pull factor kept growing until it resulted in what we saw. 100,000 people entering another country and the police letting it happen under orders from Marlaska. Why is Chinese intelligence leaking this now? It's a gesture in favor of Sanchez, who is their best ally in Europe. That gives him some breathing room. But at the same time, Xi Jinping's government knows that Sanchez is finished and they are negotiating countless trade agreements with Morocco. For example, factories for electric vehicle components are being set up in Moroccan territory. If the United States and Israel have Morocco as an ally on the other side of the Strait of Gibraltar, Beijing believes it controls it with Sanchez, but they know he is very weak. And in the end, it's the United Kingdom through Gibraltar that establishes control over that place, which is so strategically important geopolitically. And in this Game of Thrones and interests, there's a character who was strangely absent, right? Rodriguez Zapatero, yes, the man who has done business all over the world, the one who has set the agenda for Spain's foreign policy, even taking advantage of trips by their majesties, the king and queen, or by Sanchez himself to make deals behind the scenes. Zapatero has been the one who has managed our country's foreign policy and also the alliances with Morocco. There is a person very close to Zapatero that you should know about, Khalil Binebin. Pay attention to the family of this man who grew up in the royal palace of Morocco. Khalil Binebin is the son of Mohammed Binebin. Who was he? Hassan II's court jester. Yes, they had jesters. Hassan II, the father of Mohammed VI, had him living in the palace to entertain him. This was the father of this Khalil, now a tycoon, businessman, billionaire, and of course, a friend of the family. The son of the jester and the son of Sultan Hassan II were practically raised together in the palace. The mother of this Khalil rose very high, becoming a very influential minister in the Moroccan government. Therefore, we're not talking about just any businessman, but the palace businessman, the right-hand man of Mohammed VI. He travels around the world to do business with a diplomatic passport like Zapatero, but not just a Moroccan one. They say he has a French diplomatic passport and also an American one. And he has so much money that he has managed to build mansions in Marrakesh, in Miami, in Paris, and listen, in Gran Canaria. Yes, he also has a garden mansion in Gran Canaria. This guy, Khalil Binibin, owed the Spanish tax authorities 4,300 euros. He kept that debt for 11 years since 2015. He appeared on that list, the blackmail the tax office uses against debtors every year for 11 years. And suddenly the debt vanished. It doesn't exist and there's no record that he paid it. How can that be? What happened in between? Well, it's very simple. Khalil Binebine approached Rodriguez Zapatero, and Rodriguez Zapatero appointed him as a member of the advisory board of Gates Center. Gates Center is one of his companies that has given him the most money. The headquarters is on Velasquez Street, but it also has another one in Beijing. Why does he appoint this Moroccan magnate as an advisor? Well, to reach agreements with the Moroccan government and have the Moroccan monarchy on his side. And in exchange, maybe he cleared his debt of 4,300 euros, supposedly, because a lot of things happened around those dates. He placed him in his company in 2022, a few months earlier. Pegasus was used to investigate Sanchez's phone. A few months earlier, just a few, Sanchez changed his position on Western Sahara regarding Morocco. And a few days earlier, Zapatero is recorded as having visited Maria Jesus Montero back in April 2022. How do we know that? Because in the schedules of Gertrude Salcazar, his secretary, everything is written down. And yes, back in April 2022, Zapatero was visiting Maria Jesus Montero, the Minister of Finance. He went up, as always, using the minister's elevator so that no one would see him. And who knows if he asked her for a favor for his friend Binibin. The truth is that this Khalil is now Rodriguez's right-hand man, Zapatero. And the link that connects Zapatero's business with Morocco's business. We'll keep pulling on that thread. It seems interesting. And I sometimes wonder, is there any high-ranking official, former minister or former president from the PSOE who doesn't have business in Morocco? Is there anyone left whose hands are clean because they didn't take part in a dictatorship like the sultans? Someday we'll answer that. Welcome, get ready. You're going to like today's first guest. Because Morocco's blackmail didn't start with Pegasus, no. It started with March 11th, the Atoka attack. Today, all the details in 1 minute with Commissioner Villarejo. Don't miss it.
Yes.
Castillón Confidencial by Albert Castillón.
Ladies and gentlemen, as of today, Spain could be the best ally of the United States in Southern Europe, not Morocco. We could have occupied that position, which in fact we had with Aznar's policies and the Azores trio. What happened that made us go looking for allies in Venezuela or China? What happened? March 11th. That changed everything. Here we've talked more than once about who the perpetrators of the attack were and who the masterminds were. We've always talked about Morocco and France, but today we have all the details which haven't been told until now in a magnificent book that has just come out in paperback and that all of you should buy. Let's see if we can understand what's happening in this country. The March 11th attacks, France and Morocco are to blame. The book has just come out. As I said, it's on Amazon, and the author, whom you know well, is Commissioner Jose Manuel Villarejo. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to your program.
It's a pleasure. So today we could be what Morocco is to the United States, Morocco and the United States.
No doubt, no doubt. That was a brilliant move. I have no choice but to admit it. From the French intelligence services, who, along with their accomplice, who could be none other than Morocco, designed a strategy to destabilize Spain. With the extremely serious attacks, the most serious we have ever suffered, and in fact the worst in Europe as well, namely the brutality of the March 11th train attacks. That changed everything because, in addition, it was an operation that was later skillfully handled by the Socialist Party, giving all Spaniards the impression that we were the ones to blame. The People's Party had been the one who provoked these attacks, which is an aberration and a tremendous lie, isn't it? I include them in my book and explain it in detail because I experienced it firsthand.
Right? No, in your book, it's not an explanation. You provide evidence, documents, even previously secret written notes that say something must be done about Spain. It has to be stopped. What was the role of each country? What was their involvement? Who was the mastermind, Morocco or France?
Without a doubt, the mastermind was France, and there was an attempt by France to give a warning before the attack. That's why President Giscard d'Estaing urgently visited Aznar, but Aznar ignored him since he had the support of his big brother, the famous one, which was Bush then. But there was a key person in that matter with whom I had a very special friendship, and that's the notary Felix Pastori Riduejo, who, together with Fraga, were the ones who founded Alianza Popular. So, and he was also the one who made Aznar, because he was a man from Soria who, back in the day, saw Aznar's potential and was the one who proposed him as Fraga's successor. Well, this man was very Francophile in the sense that he had studied at the Sorbonne, and he knew the ins and outs of France very well, how things were done, and he was the one who, immediately after that visit, met with Aznar. And he told him, hey, be careful with these people, they're serious, they're on alert and all that. He didn't listen to him, he provoked. In fact, on a front page he did in El Mundo, he warned about the risk that the famous Azores photo posed and all that. Aznar dismissed him from everything anyway. So France realized that if the People's Party continued, its influence in the Mediterranean would be greatly diminished, and as a consequence of that, all the influence it had in the Maghreb would collapse. Even more so, especially after the incident that took place in Perejil, which led the United States to strongly support Spain against Morocco, thinking that it would be the opposite, right? Morocco then consulted its dad, France, and quickly rushed to prepare the operation, and that's how it happened. They designed the operation, Morocco provided the people, and unfortunately, we provided the explosives, right?
Yes, because two types of explosives were found. And one of them, according to your book, was the kind that the civil guard kept in their storage, the kind they seized from ETA, and to others, to other terrorists. But the civil guard didn't know they were giving explosives to be put on trains, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The civil guard, from what I learned later, and well, I already knew back then, was deceived by the French intelligence services. The French said there was a very dangerous group that was trafficking explosives and that it was important to intercept them. So, together with them, they designed what is called a controlled delivery operation. That's why they used informants from Asturias to check out the explosives. Since in the end a significant amount of the stockpiles they had was missing, they made it easier. That's why there's something very obvious in that operation, and it's that when Chino and the rest of his accomplices show up, they come to Madrid in two vehicles that were also stolen and are intercepted several times by the civil guard. They stopped them to check if they switched vehicles. And of course, they were stolen vehicles. With the slightest check, there was enough to stop them, especially given the excessive weight they were carrying, yet they still let them go. Why? Because they had tracking beacons on them. The problem is that those beacons were intercepted by the French, deactivated, and their trail was lost when they entered Madrid. And that's the reason why traces of both explosives show up in the debris. The two types of explosives, which drives everyone crazy, and as a justification, they say it's because it got contaminated in the lab. But of course, after the second or third contamination, what did they do? Destroy all the remains, which is an aberration. Probably more than because of complicity, it was the clumsiness with which both sides handled the situation. When someone gets caught, instead of saying, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, they hide their errors, giving the impression that they're complicit. But in no way, obviously, the civil guard, which for me is still a highly skilled and highly trained force, except for, some of its leaders, as we've seen these days. The rest deserve all my respect.
Without a doubt. The book is brutal. It explains things in detail. For example, the terrorists who planted the bombs, who are Moroccan, had their phones tapped for months. However, their conversations had not been listened to. For 15 days, if they had done so, they would have known they were going to carry out an attack because there was no money for Arabic translators. That's how it is.
Unfortunately, that's how it is. They were being monitored, on the other hand, because of suspicions of jihadism. But at a certain point, the Commissioner General for Intelligence stopped paying the interpreters, who were also interpreters of a dialect spoken in the Nador area and all that region. They said they hadn't been paid because there were no funds, and both were owed 2,000 euros a month. And no, the problem was of a sexual nature. They were upset because this one was angry because another boss of his did have a certain intimate relationship with that interpreter. And since they didn't give him a chance in the matter, he simply decided to fire her. Surprisingly, this guy was later rewarded when the changes came by being made head of security at Iberia, which is something that's surprising, just like with the director. And the director of the CNI, who was rewarded with a very significant embassy, when at a certain point he knew perfectly well who had prepared the attacks, and until the very last moment deceived Aznar himself by telling him that it was ETA, right?
It's very hard, Commissioner Villarejo, to understand that one or two countries, Morocco and France, are capable of murdering almost 200 people to redirect international politics. It's tremendous. Who came up with that idea? Who was the man or the prime minister who said go ahead? Who was it?
When it comes to a country's interests, whatever procedures are necessary get used, unfortunately. And the victims are collateral damage. They're the price to pay that everyone regrets. But the idea is that the end justifies the means, right? France has shown in recent years that its secret service is much more violent, much more aggressive. Let's remember when they attacked the Greenpeace ship to sink it and many other operations. In the book, I describe exactly who the agents involved are, what equipment, the special unit that's called the pool, because it's right next to the swimming facilities, let's say, from France, and in some way just like us. Unfortunately, when the issue of the GAL, we decided to put an end to ETA's safe haven, and there were a number of deaths that had nothing to do with ETA. Why? Because it was a way to send a very important message, by the way, that Spain was already tired of being soft when it came to allowing France to have the safe haven for ETA members. That, on the contrary, is what France did. They needed a major operation like the one they carried out, and proof of that is that the attack took place on Thursday. Since there are doubts and so on, they make it so that one of the backpacks suddenly miraculously appears somewhere, right? It's not connected. So all the show they put on to deactivate the placebo, the X-ray, it was already clear that the wires weren't connected. And since there were doubts, they even left a note in the M30 mosque claiming that it had been the Arabs. And what did all that lead to? Obviously, to the urgency on Saturday, which also led to everything that happened, including the siege of the Faraz headquarters. Sorry, of all of the popular party on Genova Street. And all of that led people to vote more with emotion than with logic and reasoning. It's an agit-prop technique which intelligence services use, and I understand, really, despite how terrible and painful it was for the victims and so on, I understand that it was an operation that was fundamental for France. It was vital, and it worked out well for them. Proof of that is that we've ended up with a Mr. Zapatero who spends his free time dabbling in jewelry. And well, what about the current president? Well, I already warned people in 2014 in an intelligence report about who this person was. And even so, well,
You did it. Let's move on to the questions that I think are important. Everything we talk about is wild, it's brutal, and you can't understand how, even with evidence, the public here doesn't know about it. Or most people don't know what we're explaining. The $1 million question, because we know about the relationship between the PSOE and Morocco for decades, even with Felipe Gonzalez. Zapatero knew. He knew that the Atocha attacks were going to happen.
I can't answer with certainty because I always like to respond based on what I've known, what I've seen, or let's say what I've experienced. What is true is that before the attacks, there had already been a trial run, which was in 2003, a year earlier, when Spain's interests were specifically attacked in Morocco, the Spanish houses in Nador and so on, a series of things. And also on that occasion, it was blatantly a rehearsal. In that case, yes, they were suicide bombers, but they were actually Moroccans of French origin. Curiously, when explanations were requested, they just gave evasive answers. And previously, Zapatero had attended a, let's say, disgraceful meeting with the king, where behind them there was a map showing the Sahara, Ceuta, and Melilla as Moroccan territory, right? And he allowed it, he accepted it, probably because of his treacherous character, right? Along with a tyrant like the King of Morocco. To allow that message to Morocco and the rest of the world that he was giving in to all of Morocco's interests. Later, it became clear after the attacks that both France and Morocco demanded a toll to be paid. I don't understand why, because if they had nothing to do with it, why were they given so much? From the moment Zapatero, let's say, takes a position, from the moment he takes a position, he forgets about the urgency of finding out who was responsible. They were granted a series of very important privileges, like one of the biggest construction companies in Spain, Gesina, which was handed over to France. They tried to grant them BBVA. Fortunately, well, within a year or two, it should be resolved. A case in which I am charged for that, where fortunately we managed to stop that operation in which Societe Generale granted an absurd loan to someone who had huge debts. Someone named Rivero, because he was going to be the scapegoat so that later they could give that important bank control over France. And throughout the Maghreb region, the influence of the CNI collapsed. Almost all of the important units they had in Tangier disappeared. Duan, Casablanca, and it was reduced to a minimum. And even so, they have been very effective because they did warn about the invasion that happened on the 30th. It's another thing that now they want to deny the importance of all those agents who did warn about it.
No doubt. So the first blackmail from Morocco to Spain wasn't Pegasus, it was the March 11th attacks.
No doubt, no doubt. The March 11th attacks, before that the Perigil crisis, and before that the 2003 attacks. It's a stress test to see how far, to what extent Spain is determined to beat him again, just like it won all the battles against Morocco before, right? In that sense, unfortunately, when we find ourselves, as we did with the Green March, in a situation of extreme weakness, which exists right now. Right now, we are in a situation that is institutionally critical, with a crown completely stripped of all its duties, only dedicated, well, to whining every time there's a tragedy and giving the impression that they feel the same as those who have suffered. Also, but at such a crucial moment as this, it's absurd that the king hasn't immediately shown up in Ceuta and Melilla. Well, he's never done it, not even as a prince. They've never let him travel, right? So if the head of state can't take that initiative for the sake of the image of the Spanish people, honestly, I understand that he may have achieved something, but what Sanchez has achieved is that he's practically hollowed out the crown. So that if he governs again, the first thing he'll do is change it to a republic. I have no doubt about it, right?
It's incredible because we still have fresh in our minds what happened a week ago, the invasion of Ceuta, which happened on the same day while they were invading Spain, that a bunch of high-ranking officials from journalism, politics, and the judiciary were going to pay homage to the King of Morocco at the Moroccan embassy in Madrid. Because I understand that most of those who went there know this story about 11M, and they couldn't care less. There was Minister Planas, Judge Pedraz, journalist Nacho Abad, and Felipe Gonzalez. The ombudsman was there too. Why did such important people in current and past Spanish politics go to kneel before the one who allegedly helped murder 200 Spaniards?
Well, it's hard to understand that kind of deference unless there's a business matter involved, right? I think that except for Judge Pedras, who I understand really likes folklore and parties and all that, but without any other substance. Because when it comes down to it, it's being shown that he has a certain independence when it comes to investigating issues that affect both the Socialist Party and the Popular Party. The rest, well, Pedro Sanchez knows perfectly well that despite the disagreements he has with Felipe Gonzalez is a great ally of his on issues related to Morocco. Why? Because he has major economic interests. Whenever he goes to Morocco, well, the king himself told him, Mohammed gave him a magnificent piece of land, a house that he later ended up selling, and in the end, it ended up in the hands of the United States. Did they give it to the current king's sister? By the way, both the king and his sister, let's say, are sexually interested in things that are contrary to what's considered normal. Well, to what's considered normal. I don't want to get into trouble about what's normal or not normal, but we all bring up the king's sister's girlfriends and the king's boyfriends. And does that influence or not when it comes to pressure from the secret services, both French and from the United States and Israel, right? The case of Nacho Abad, well, I've had personal experience with him, as on more than one occasion he's invited me to that show he has at night and so on. At the last minute, he called to say he'd been threatened and couldn't do it because someone told him not to. One time he used the excuse that it was Ana Rosa, a good friend of mine back in the day, who had requested it. But the other day, in a live interview he did with me about Operation Kitchen, when he asked me some questions, totally, let's say, malicious, as if I had or hadn't been paid by the dirty tricks apparatus for all those audios and for that whole report, which served as the basis for preparing the setup of those famous PSOE sewers. When I replied to him and said, well, then come to my show, I said, no, I'm not going to go because I'm sure that right now, Liv, he'll say yes, but later it'll turn out not to be true. No, I assure you that I'm going to go and all that. They asked me for my phone number when it ended. A few days later, he sent a message to his producer and told me there are pressures from the network so that, no, come on. I mean, there are people who have, let's say, a second interpretation, just like Evaristo, not the one from Everything is a Lie. In the end, except for brave people like you and like some others whom I hope won't face much retaliation later, no, you're one of the only people who dares to give me a voice because all I've been is an inconvenient witness to power. And in the end, getting rid of me has only delayed the inevitable. Go ahead with the independence movement. I was at the forefront of the attacks. Something was going to happen on La Rambla and foresaw the tricks being played. I even predicted what would happen with Pedro Sanchez and the upcoming motion of no confidence a month and a half before my arrest. Why? Because I have tried to have a good level of information, and that's why last year in August, I predicted, thanks to information from my friends in the United States, that Maduro was going to fall, and then Zapatero, right? People always say it's Villarejo's stuff, but I'm not a fortune teller. I'm just someone who tries to stay informed.
No doubt. Tell me in advance when Pedro Sanchez will leave or when we will get rid of him.
I'm sorry to say that I'm not really sure. Look, the other day, I'll tell you something, an exclusive. The other day, one of my friends from the HSI, from the intelligence service, the one who took down Maduro and Zapatero, who are almost all Hispanic, Puerto Rican, Cuban, and so on. Well, I found out because he told me he was here on vacation. And so just recently I went over to see him, and he told me there was a terrible maneuver to take control of the strait from the area of Morocco, which was going to be controlled by the United States. And what about the area of Gibraltar, which has already been given to the English for free? That is such an important strait as Gibraltar in Anglo-Saxon hands. Why? Because they don't trust Spain, or for whatever reason. And the most surprising thing, could Pedro Sanchez take advantage of that invasion that will undoubtedly take place next year, where now, besides not being 72,000 or 80,000, it's going to be a large enough number to expel practically a design very similar to what happened with Crimea, where the Russians invaded that area. And that 30 or 40% of pro-Russians were the ones who influenced the expulsion of the others. Here we already have a very high percentage that is going to happen. So taking advantage of that critical situation, Pedro Sanchez could say that he won't call elections because we're in a situation of crisis, of hybrid war, of covert war. And therefore, we don't know if he'll ever, call them. When he thinks he's going to win them, when he has those 2 million new Spaniards he needs, who are going to change the scenario a bit. On that score, I'm afraid we're going to have this president for a long time, because I already described it in the report I made, right? His peculiar sense of humor and his personality profile, right?
That's incredible. But I really agree with what he says. Commissioner Villarejo, I'll let you rest since it's August. A big hug. Good luck with this book. Gentlemen, the 11M attacks France and Morocco are to blame. The pocket edition has just come out. Go to Amazon to look for it because it's a gem. It's something that if it sells out, it won't be easy to reprint. Thank you always for your kindness, for this space.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful.
Castillo.
Confidential by Albert Castillo. Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillo. These days, we're receiving a lot of viral videos. We've already shown some of them during the season, but now they have a special impact. Watch how Mohammed VI honors Zapatero and Felipe Gonzalez.
Mr. Luis Rodriguez Zapatero, former Prime Minister of Spain.
Receiving the highest honors from Mohammed VI. What did he do in return? Well, Zapatero did a lot and Mohammed helped him reach Moncloa, right? Thanks to March 11th. And there is Felipe Gonzalez, just like Zapatero, receiving decorations. They have gone viral. It's good to remember it's never a bad thing. Listen to what they tell us. There are many opinions. Fraguas, Asuncion, and Fernando.
Why is there so much outrage about the invasion of the city of Medellin? The people who are outraged are those who don't know about a problem, then encounter it, and it affects their dignity. Why defend the dignity of something that was visible, known, and ignored? We must remember that over half of Spain wants and votes for this. They are very happy because their policy has succeeded, and we have accepted the rules of the game of the 78 regime, which says that we have to accept what the majority decides. So where is the problem? Where's the energy to protest if this truly impacted us? It only seems to matter during soccer. 2.5 million people filled the streets in Madrid and across Spain to celebrate the win. That is to say, we have the energy to react to what matters to us. Soccer matters to us. The city of Vigo, Medellin, Spain, it seems like it doesn't matter. I'm not outraged. I already, and I think the followers of this show, knew about this problem. Therefore, outrage is out of place.
Something that is obvious is that days ago we gave Gibraltar away to the Anglos. Now Morocco is invading Ceuta. Goodbye to control of the strait. That was the goal. But look, Morocco doesn't lift a finger unless it's with the approval of the United States and Israel. Gentlemen analysts, keep telling us that it's Sanchez's government's fault. Come on, that's something that's going to be obvious. Sanchez and all his followers are traitors to Spain. But behind it all is the United States. Come on, all our ancestors know that.
Continuing with the information from relatives I have in Ceuta, they keep telling me that there are still thousands of Moroccans in the area, many of them spreading insecurity, fear, and panic. And I also want to point out and emphasize that Marlaska said yesterday that Ceuta and Melilla are not part of the Schengen area. The European Commission quickly corrected him, but these people don't care.
No doubt. They also sent me an image. It largely went unnoticed. It's the tower of the Endesa thermal power plant in Galicia, in As Pontes. They blew it up like this.
I almost went home and watched it on the newsreel.
Man,
It's Miguel who sent us the picture. They gave it a Galician-style send-off. Many people felt sad because he was part of the character of the place. Others loved it because it broke up the landscape. To each their own. The nice thing about Galicians is how they celebrate these things. Well, and I'm also getting information that the Descenso Foundation platform, which belongs to Vox, has launched a magnificent documentary about Delcy Rodriguez. You have to watch it. The title alone says it all. Delcy, Anatomy of a Chavista Enforcer. This is the trailer. The trailer. Sonado, Cabello, Delcy, Jorge Rodriguez. There it is. They want to prevent the whitewashing of Delcy Rodriguez. It's going to be made public soon, and I recommend you watch it. More messages, phones, they're still working. Pilar, Pepe, and Hector.
The first and main reason for the existence of the state is to guarantee national security. If that doesn't happen, there's no justification for maintaining the state. Tax resistance is legitimate, and when the state does not protect the people and the people are forced to defend themselves, the state loses all its legitimacy.
As Zapatero said in that interview with Iñaki Gabilondo, that it's in our interest for there to be tension. This is the tension they wanted. This shameless guy is on vacation in La Mareta while Ceuta is being invaded by 20,000 Moroccans. This is what we want. I've seen some images that show exactly what it is and the image of this country. This country has sold itself out, and this country is rotten because of the disgusting policies we have.
I want to send a message to the man who is at La Mareta. May God give him twice what he wishes for us. This would be the greatest joy in the world for me.
That could be Hector, a biblical parable. May he get double what he has given to the Spanish people. Come on, even half would be enough to end his political career. I hope there will be human justice, not divine, for someone who has done as much harm to Spain as Sanchez. He's still on vacation, well, 4 or 5 weeks, and they tell me be careful because Sanchez didn't use his vacation days. He doesn't use them to rest, no, but to think, to come up with new challenges, to plan new alleged electoral frauds, rigged elections, impossible deals. Last time he was gone for 5 days, Lair's dirty tricks operation was set up. God help us when he comes back, because he's had not 5 days but almost 5 weeks. What could he have been thinking? What could have been going through his sick, narcissistic dictator's mind all that time? Last messages, Kalayan, Nati, and Isabel.
Where is the patriotism? Where is the Spaniard who loves his country? Where is he? The World Cup euphoria is over. The colors of the flag don't matter anymore. Gentlemen, we have to do something for this country, which has given us everything. Personally, I have been embraced by this nation. I have been here for 24 years, and I consider myself more Spanish than anything else. Honestly, I have built my life here, and I am outraged, not because of the politicians, no. What really outrages me is seeing so many Spaniards just staying quiet. As long as there's money for a beer, as long as people can keep living quietly, no. This is an invasion. We have to kick the psychopath out of Moncloa. We have to kick out Pedro Sanchez, gentlemen.
Regarding the invasion, I think the only solution I see right now is for someone to leak the data they've gotten from Pegasus, whether it's true or not, whatever they've received. And once they're out, it can no longer be used to blackmail them. So from now on, we would talk differently. Hello?
Albert, try to get informed.
Because I've heard people say that members of the CNI have warned Fei Yo that if the People's Party won the next elections, and it was together with Vox, the PSOE has decided that they would blow up the government in 6 months. Thank you.
It was published. Paloma Yarvila said it in The Objective. There's no doubt about it. In other words, Sanchez has a plan to allegedly commit electoral fraud with the grandchildren law, mail, or the new law that lets him be in the right place. But if he doesn't manage to do it in the end, plan B is to stay on as Secretary General of the PSOE and bring down the government, which would be a PP Vox government, in as few months as possible. How? By striking at its weak point, bringing the unions, comisiones, and UGT out onto the streets every day to protest. Looking for dirt, because in the CNI, remember what Jose Maria, our secret agent in Spain, told us here, every party has its own people in the CNI, even Podemos. Yes, and the PSOE is the one that has the most. What do you think, that they haven't been looking for dirt? Real or fake, about the PP and Vox to bring it all out on the first day they govern? Of course they've done it, because that plan, Isabel, exists. That plan exists. And I really liked what Nati said, like, well, let them make the Pegasus thing public and the blackmail will be over. Yes, but the thing is, Israel doesn't want to make it public because they say it would harm Morocco. I've been insisting for years within the Mossad circles for them to make the Pegasus thing public, or at least part of it. And they tell me no, because it would harm Morocco. They've only told me about 5% of what they know. Well, in the end, we're just bargaining chips. They still hold all the cards. Latest messages, newsroom, Susana Gas, tell us.
We're still here, Albert. In the newsroom of Castilla y Castellón Confidential, we're receiving a lot of messages and opinions. Take Alfabeti, for example. Zapatero and Sanchez thought they were untouchable because Sanchez has his partners in his pocket. Of course, no one is untouchable in this life. Joaquin also writes to us. He says, thank you very much for your work, Mr. Albert Castellón, all year long without a break. You are working really hard. Your work is enormous, intelligent, informative, and serious, and also very useful for everyone. Manuel says, let's not forget that he still hasn't presented the budget. Let's remember everything that's happened this year, especially that the budget still hasn't been presented, yet he's still in government. Who said you can't govern without a budget? Remember Pedro Sanchez's phrase? There you have it. Paki says that Sanchez knows Spain has endurance, a lot of endurance, and that we put up with almost everything. The volcano, the storm, the fires, the pandemics, and nothing happens here. What will be next? After his terrible vacation, Maria also says that this isn't about the left or the right. This is about defending our country, our forests, our culture. We all have to leave the cities of Spain to fight against this government, especially this government that leaves us abandoned and has left us abandoned. As always, Maria Luisa says we're alone. It's true. If we don't wake up now with what we're living through and what's happening. then when are we going to fight against what will come with this government we have and the citizens aren't doing their part? They're still going to make things harder for us and make things even worse. What's waiting for us this winter? You can't drive on the roads anymore. They've been patched over so many times and citizens can't take it anymore. This is chaos. Everything that's happening in Spain, but here nothing happens. We keep fighting and holding on however we can. Marian says jail for all of them. Those responsible for the corrupt organization, allegedly corrupt, of the tyrant Pedro Sanchez, and above all, Antonia congratulates you again. She says the shows you do are amazing, thoroughly put together, and thanks to you, many of us who aren't watching TV are staying informed. Actually, I haven't watched television since '96. Can you imagine? Thank you very much for everything, and we'll leave it here to see if it's really important to encourage and invite. To everyone watching us every day, you can also follow us on these channels where we have a lot of information, obviously with Albert Castellon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I really like what Sophia sent me. Watch this video.
Thank you. If you are driving to Ceuta in the next few days, remember that you must carry the approved V16 beacon. Otherwise, you might get fined.
Yes, 100,000 people can come in, but if you don't have the beacon, you'll be the one paying the fine. That's how we've let this government control us. Well, I have more. They say Marlaska would be a very loyal dog. Some people say he is. To Sanchez's dog?
Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time to stay calm. The situation in Ceuta has completely turned around, and it is now safe to go out on the streets as usual. If you see Moroccans stabbing, stealing, or getting too close to women, it's because your eyes are fascist and racist. In addition, we have taken strong measures, such as deploying more police officers to protect Pedro Sanchez and me, and thus guarantee the safety of the citizens. And finally, let me tell you that neither Morocco nor our intelligence services knew absolutely anything about what was going to happen in Ceuta. We are innocent, and in that case, the bad guys are the European Union and the far right. So stay calm and keep voting for the person.
Yes, a loyal little dog, as I said. Well, and I really like the playlist. You know that while 100,000 people were flooding into and invading Spain, Sanchez was recommending music on TikTok. Well, then the next playlist will be something like this.
This summer, I've put together a playlist for you with some of the songs I've been listening to the most this year. It's quite eclectic, so I'll highlight 3 that will definitely give you an idea of where I'm going.
Of course, Arabic music and dressed in Arabic style, that's it. And you see at the feet where Mohammed passes by. Yes, that's how it is, my friends. There's nothing more. Well, and a video of Irene Montero welcoming the invaders has gone viral. This one.
Here you have your PSG tracksuit, fanny pack, and some money. Welcome. You're now an official cigarette friend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
That's life, my friends. Get ready because this summer has a lot more in store. We're not even halfway through the month, and so much has already happened. More tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you here in the trenches. Have a great day.
Tú lo sabes y yo lo sé. Somos confidenciales. Tú eres confidencial. Yo soy confidencial. Todos confidenciales. Todos confidenciales. Pero solo para mentes abiertas y para gente despierta. Desde la trinchera las balas silban y no hay manera de salir allá afuera. Aquí la libertad tiene las alas de cera. Albert Castillo, Susana Gash, Tucci Castillo y demás. Muchas gracias. Skits gadelidu, badadelidu, con esto y un bizcocho hasta
Castellon Confidential by Albert Castellon.